Shalom, good morning, y'all. So I want to have a discussion this morning, and I might shake the table a bit, but y'all will be all right. Y'all used to me shaking the table anyway. But I want to get into this whole concept of sex is marriage because I see a lot of people using that um as as a reason to have sex outside of marriage, and also stating that a ceremony is not biblical. But um I found some things in my study that prove otherwise. And there are many precepts that I'm going to insert into the caption. I'm not going to go through it through this video just for the sake of time. But there is scripture, Joshua 31. And I know a lot of you like to say that Jasher is not a reliable book, but I am fully persuaded that the elites did remove the non-canonical books uh, to keep people walking in disobedience and not walking in truth to our Father's word, right? And until you actually study the word for yourself instead of listening to what other people have to say and the ones that's constantly telling you not to read it, you're not going to truly understand what's going on in scripture. All right. So this idea that sex equals marriage, and I'm reading from my notes, um, and that a ceremony is not biblical because a lot of people, sometimes even believers, like even Christians say this. I've heard Christian teachers say this. Um, and they come to this conclusion on their own. But when we look at scripture, it's not that simple. So in Joshua 31, it tells us that in verse 1 of 31, it says, and in the seventh year, Yaakov's service, which he served Laban, was completed. And Yaakov said unto Laban, give me my woman, for the days of my service are fulfilled. And Laban did so. And Laban and Yaakov assembled all the people of that place, and they made a feast. Assembled all the people of that place, and they made a feast. Pay attention to that. And then, verse 2, in the evening, Laban came to the house, and afterward Yaakov came there with the people of the feast. And Laban extinguished all the lights that were in the house. And just to go on to say, that's when they consummated the covenant, right? So we have a formal feast. Excuse me, we have a feast and a formal arrangement first, and then the consummation came later. The sexual act sealed the marriage, but it didn't define it. The covenant and intention were established before Jacob went to Leah, right? So this shows us that sex is not marriage, it simply consummates it. And we see the same principle when sex happens outside of marriage. And a few people brought this up in my last post as well, with Dinah and Shakim and Tamar and Yahuda. There were sexual encounters, but they were not marriages, and the men involved didn't make a covenant or formal commitment. Scripture shows that without intention, covenant, or ceremony, sex alone doesn't create marriage. Marriage in Yah's eyes includes covenant, faithfulness, and honoring Him. The bed may be undefiled within the confinements of marriage, but sex outside that is covenant. Sex outside that covenant is considered sin. So marriage is established with Yah's approval, intention, and commitment, and not merely by the act of sex. So when we read the word, we have to be careful not to oversimplify things, right? Sex is important. It consummates a marriage, but it is never the defining factor. The covenant, the ceremony, and the intention come first, and sex follows the complete, and sex follows to complete it. And that's the pattern we see over and over in scripture, right? So let's go over what consummate means. Consummate is to complete or make something official, especially a marriage, bisexual intercourse. In other words, the marriage covenant or ceremony happens first, and consummation is the act that seals it physically and legally or spiritually. More broadly, consummate can also mean to complete, perfect, or bring to full realization. But in marriage discussions, it almost always refers to the sexual act that finalizes the union. So if consummate is a complete, that word is very important. I told y'all when reading the scripture, you have to exegete these words in this text and stop taking the scripture by face value. Because if you do it that way, you're going to go your own way, have your own thoughts, and come to your own conclusion. And that's not how the word works. Consummate is to complete or seal something that has already been started. If you haven't had sex yet, then what's being started? In marriage, It's the sexual act that finalizes the covenant, not the act that creates it. So the core meaning, again, to complete, finish, or make perfect in marriage, it specifically refers to the sexual act that finalizes the union. So it's the final step, y'all. You can't consummate something that hasn't already started. Like I said, example, you can't consummate a marriage if the covenant or agreement isn't already in place. The act makes the relationship complete in a formal sense. It doesn't create the marriage, it completes or seals it. So think of it like a contract. You sign the contract first, which is a covenant. Then you perform the final act that fulfills or seals the agreement, which is a consummation. So without the first step, the final act doesn't accomplish the full goal. So in marriage, consummation symbolizes unity and commitment, but it requires prior covenant and intention. It also helps explain why sex outside of marriage doesn't create a marriage. It cannot consummate a covenant that does not exist. Now, I do believe that consummation without a covenant or ceremony before Yahuwah can create soul ties. It's not something I have scripture for, so I can't back that up just yet. But let me keep studying. I might come back months later, but I'm gonna find something. You heard me? But it's something that I've seen spiritually and physically discern. It's a caution to be careful with intimacy outside of covenant because it can leave emotional and spiritual marks even when we don't intend to.